What's up, everybody? This is Jeff iNcontroL Robinson. I'm going to be doing another vlog on kind of my thoughts and feelings on the Legacy of the Void closed beta as it came out a couple nights ago. I've been playing it as close to non-stop as any responsible adult human man can. Waking up, with that StarCraft hangover that is also familiar after having played until 5 a.m. 2 nights in a row and playing it and thinking about it all day. I've gotten a chance to play quite a bit. I've played the Zerg, the Terran, and the Protoss, of course, mostly Protoss. And I've streamed just about all of it. In fact, yeah, just about all of it. I actually have played some off-stream. So I feel like I'm pretty qualified to give some thoughts about it, and I'm going to go through all the changes. I'm going to talk about the stuff, the patch notes, as it were, kind of the, not UI, but just kind of general game changes, and then I'm going to talk about the racial changes as well. And just give my thoughts on where we're at right now. It kind of goes without saying, but I feel like it is necessary to say this. There's going to be the giant asterisk of, well, this is a closed beta, and it's day 2 of said closed beta, so a lot of the criticisms, and probably some of the compliments, but probably not that many, they'll probably keep the good stuff, could be irrelevant, could change, or at least very much so need to be discussed. So that's going to be the intent behind this. This is a long video. The ones in the past have been anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes, maybe a little bit less, so if you don't already, sit back, relax, let my soothing sexual voice. No, not that sexual, but probably pretty soothing. Maybe soothing. Maybe soothing. Anyways, let me talk. So, first and foremost, let's talk about the general gameplay changes, because in my opinion, actually, this is perhaps the greatest achievement of the Legacy of the Void as it's projected so far. I love this area of the game right now. We all know about the things, well, excuse me, maybe you're watching this because you don't know, but anyways, half of the mineral patches have 1,500 minerals, same as HOTS, and the other half have 750. So effectively, this is 50% of each base is essentially 50% of the amount of resources available to it. Also, there's a change to the Vespene gas as well. It went from 2,500 to 1,700 as well, so not quite 50%. Yeah. Anytime I do math on camera, I'm always like, God, make sure it's correct, because I don't want to look like an idiot, but that time I was. Also a huge reduction there. So let's just talk about that real quick. What this means is that each base is going to mine out significantly faster, and what this does to the game is gives it a little bit more of kind of a Brood War feel, where you can't sit on 1 or 2 bases and really just, 20 minutes of mining those bases. They mine out so fast. They mine out really, really quick. If you do any kind of cheese or even a 2-base timing attack, right now, as it stands, there's a very good chance that you're going to be running out of your main base if said attack doesn't work, which means it increases the amount of likelihood for risk versus reward, as opposed to in the past where you could do a 2-base timing attack, and as long as you did some damage, you've either gimped them, in which case you're ahead, or, you equally trade, it's fine, you go ahead and take a third, and everybody knows about the complaints. Again, I keep saying that, I gotta stop saying this is an opinion piece vlog. I'm gonna get better at this, I promise. Well, in Heart of the Swarm and earlier, like Wings of Liberty, the bases lasted so darn long, and there was kind of an economy to your harvesters that if you hit a certain saturation, 16 plus at each base, between 16 and 24, you really didn't need any more. So you just kind of always expanded to the next base, and it was always just big army fights, and that's really cool for some people. But for StarCraft enthusiasts and kind of purists, I would say it's more exciting to have meaningful fights from the very early to mid and late game, with the progression being, the units you start off with are still fun and exciting because they have a huge impact, because if they don't do any damage, your economy is going to get lapped up, and you're going to be kind of caught behind the defender. So really cool economic changes. They also increased the supply for the command center, the hatchery, and of course the Nexus. This was necessary because of this segue into the next piece, which is that you start off with 12 harvesters now. I think this is such a subtle but incredibly awesome change. This is absolutely amazing. I mean, so many times, and I can say this both as a player in the past and now, currently a commentator, the beginning of the game is just like, sit back, kind of like, well, what do you think about the previous game? Yeah, previous game. What do you think about the matchup? Well, current spiel on current matchup. This is the trends. What do you think about the map? Current spiel on current map. And that's all good discussion. I'm not trying to make it sound too terrible, but it gets a little generic and bland. And I like that right now, as it is in Legacy of the Void, you just jump right into it. The game starts, the build starts taking shape within the first couple minutes, as opposed to the first half dozen. I think this is really nice. Of course, the discussion on maps and matchups and players, that kind of stuff, it still needs a place. So it's kind of funny. In broadcasting terms, I think they're going to have to do a lot more in kind of the pre-game startup, like in the lobby and before. Whereas before, that was kind of killing time because you wanted to get in the game to have that discussion so that you could then talk about meaningful stuff 3, 4, 5 minutes down the road. So it'll change a little bit, but it's not a big deal. But I really like this. This is really nice. Games feel much more... I don't want to say exciting necessarily, but they get interesting a lot faster as opposed to the, Alt-Tab, check your Twitch, your Twitter, Alt-Tab, Facebook real quick, come back, and do a couple things. Like, it was just such a handshake ordeal. It was just very simple. And this has more of a Brood War feel to it, the 12 Harvesters, because in Brood War, again, you did not start with anywhere near 5 or 12, 12 Harvesters. You start off with 4. Was it 4? Yeah, because you had 4 pool. Yep. I believe it was 4, but you only needed like 8 or 9 Harvesters to be max saturation, essentially, at a base. I think truly it was 10, but, at the realm of like 8 or 9, you're good. You're going to be making enough money off that base. So it's a very different economy. This has more of a feel to that in a very different way, but the feel of it is that it mines out faster, and you have more Harvesters to start. So I love these changes. They also changed unit scan range, and they changed the game speed. The game speed is going to match that of real time. Okay, that makes sense. Not super impactful, at least for my plebeian simple brain. The scan range is nice. Some units had trouble, like you would see a Widow Mine, you would tell it to attack that, but the damn Stalker would walk right into the Widow Mine and die anyways, even though it has range to do it without getting hurt. It just didn't scan it fast enough. So a subtle change, but a very nice one. It makes the game crisper, cleaner, and I feel like more responsive to your commands. So, in general, the general game changes make this game a faster-paced game, a more interesting game earlier on, which is going to be very observer-friendly. The audiences and laymen coming in and looking at this game are going to have more to look at earlier on, so a little bit less barrier of entry for interest for them. And the game's just going to... I feel like it has a new intensity to it. It has that StarCraft feel of desperation, constant desperation. There's an economy that is rapidly depleting. There is, meaningful units at the 30 supply and at the 40 supply, as opposed to the rare occurrences where that was the case in Heart of the Swarm, and certainly in Wings of Liberty that was even more true. So these changes get a gigantic nod, a tip of the hat, a raise of the glass, whatever else they do. Farting in Greece, I'm told, burping. That's to be polite and thank them for dinner. I don't know. It's just what an American's told about Greek people. It's going to be awesome. Very good changes there. So I'm super excited about that. Let's go ahead and get into some of the racial changes. Let's start off with Terran. I'm going to end with Protoss like any good showman could do, because they're like, well, iNcontroL, you only know Protoss. Well, okay, then you'll have to wait till the end. So there's that. Of course, it's a YouTube video, so you can just kind of skip to the head, but I digress. New unit Cyclone. So this is, let's just jump right out at it. In the notes, it's listed as a ranged factory unit that can attack both air and ground units and can use the lock-on ability. The ability, lock-on, locks onto a target, drastically increasing range and rate of fire for 14 seconds. What it doesn't say is you don't need line of sight to shoot with that as well, which is a very big deal in StarCraft 2, because a lot of times any advantage you have, like the defender advantage, is that you're up a ramp, you're over a cliff, they can't see you, you can see them, and you can do damage that way. This gets around that. So Cyclone is a real big hubbub right now. It's all the rage in TVT. Early game TVP, of course, it makes appearances there. It can still be used late game, but it's just not as great. And then in TVZ, it's more of a meta changer. If you have slowlings or queens, the Cyclone will douse you in flame and set it afire. So you need speedlings, so it kind of changes your opening and it crunches down on your economy, which means it gives the Terran, just off of meta, kind of driver's seat power. They can be like, well, I'm not going to go Cyclone, but they think I am, so I'm just going to wall in a 3cc. And now they have useless speedlings. It's not so bad. When I say useless speedlings, certainly that's not entirely true, but what I do mean is that in a game with limited information in the real-time strategy genre like this, if you know what your opponent's doing and they don't know what you are doing, they can only fear one of the options that you have because that means they have to make certain things to respond to that. You're in a very powerful position, and that's the place that Terran has with the Cyclone in the TVZ matchup in particular. So the Cyclone itself, I'm going to be kind of scathing of this, not just because I'm a bitter Protoss player and it kind of punches me in the face on a regular basis, but because I just don't like the unit. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it looks silly. It looks like the microwave robot off the Death Star in Star Wars, made a little bit more cool because it's got like 4 tracks instead of the little mini ones beneath itself. It's just not. It's not great. It's a ugly looking scooter robot that shoots missiles. I really feel like. I feel like the Hellion took that slot, guys. The Hellion looks unimpressive. The Hellbat, badass. That's a walking flamethrower mech robot monster thing. That's cool. Hellion is a 4-wheel dune buggy in the distant, grim, dark future. Not too imaginative and great. But this is not about the Hellion. This is about the Cyclone. I just don't like it aesthetically. Damage-wise, its regular attack is okay, but if it was just the regular attack, it wouldn't be used because it's nothing fancy. Doesn't shoot air. It's range 5. Does okay damage. It's a factory unit, and you're probably better off making other things. But its ability is so easy. You turn off autocast. That's the preferred way to go about it. You manually click, and as long as it's not moving, it just targets whatever the hell's the nearest thing. I believe. I don't think you can target attack with it. And then you just kite away. You kite at a range that nothing else has, and you do enough damage to kill just about anything. I think it kills an immortal, with shield and without. I believe that's the case. It just does so much damage for how 150 minerals. It's fairly easy to get at. And then again, it's kind of a meta control thing. We talked about TVZ, but in TVP it gives Protoss problems as well, because if you're scouting out with your Mothership Core, if you're scouting out with your Stalker, whoop, I hit C, and that's dead. Thank you for the free thing. Whereas in the past, it was like, that could happen with Marauders, but the range wasn't super fantastic, and they had to have Concussive Shell, and they actually have to control the Marauder fairly decently to run down a Stalker or something like that, unless you run deep into the range of the Marauder. Concussive Shell. And of course, it couldn't hit Mothership Core. So this is, again, one of the kind of comments to make here, too, in general, is scouting on some level got nerfed in Legacy of the Void because you start off with such a robust early economy. So anything else that deters from that means you're going to have some problems. You're not scouting as a Protoss player reliably until a Hallucination or Observer, or if you open up Stargate like an Oracle or a Phoenix. But that's weighted scouting. That's expensive. And then, of course, Terran and Zerg have the same issues, just in different ways. The Reaper's going to kind of get around that. That's a pretty good way to scout earlier on. And then Zerg's slow layings, yeah, I mean, same problems as before, but nothing too terribly worse, I suppose. I don't know the timings just yet. But the Cyclone is a meta problem. It's ugly, and I feel like its mechanic gets away from, on some level, what Legacy of the Void is doing a great job of, and that is that you click C, and as long as you stay within minimal range of, with your your gigantic no line of sight needed range, you're going to kill whatever it's shooting at. I think some easy fixes for this would be to reduce the range that increases the threat of the Cyclone. Maybe give a cost/upgrade for its autocast anyways. But I feel like if you do that, it probably gets nerfed too hard. So maybe a slight range decrease and you need line of sight. Or keep the range increase and you need line of sight. Something along those lines. There should be some form of escapability from it, other than the Terran player is not horrible. Because in the hands of a good player, it's just a dead, and that's just dumb. That's not how StarCraft 2 should be played. You shouldn't play in fear of that. Marauder increased the number of attacks from 1 to 2, but half the damage. I think that's interesting. I should have looked at this a little bit more ahead of time because I want to clear my thoughts on this, but here we are doing it live. That's how we do it at iNcontroL's YouTube channel. It gets updated once in a blue moon. Sorry, there'll be more content in the future. It does mean that essentially takes twice as much damage away from it from upgrades like armor and shield and stuff like that, or carapace. I don't think it's the biggest of deals. I'll be interested to see what the impact of that is. The Marauder is still a damn good unit. It doesn't, in my opinion, go up or down here. Siege Tank can now be picked up and dropped while in siege mode. That's an incredible change. Awesome as well, by the way. It makes the tank much more viable. It becomes kind of a early mid-game harass unit. There's going to be some great opportunities for micro here as well. How many times have we seen bio players with 10 medevacs, which is more than enough to load up the Bioforce, but if they wanted to make tanks, they obviously have no room for them at all. There's going to be scenarios where you now can pick up those tanks, and they're going to have some viability there, and they're going to do some things for you. There's going to be maps where tank dropping is a thing, and people have to be aware of that. It just gives more options to the tank, and it serves the person that has better micro creativity and usefulness. I think that's really cool. Banshee, new upgrade, Hyper Flight Rotors. Increases Banshee movement speed by 1.0. It had a pretty big difference. It does haul some serious ass around now. It really does. They talked a lot about changing the Banshee. There was actually a period of time where they tested out changing its range as well to increase it. And that was way too much. Banshee's already freaking good. They already made it so mech upgrades do both air and ground. And now there is an upgrade for the speed. And I appreciate that. If it was just a flat buff to its speed, I think that would be ridiculous. But making people pay for it means that if you're going to go Banshees, you now have some options to make them sexy as crap. But it's going to cost you a pretty penny. And that's what I like in RTS for the most part. I like the choices. It means that, you know, again, if you budget for it and have the right execution, that's awesome. But if you don't, you're dead. And I think that's cool. Battlecruiser. This one's awesome. New ability, Tactical Jump. After 4 seconds, warp to any target location. Battlecruiser is invulnerable while it is warping. That is awesome. I think there's going to be some seriously insane combos with this. Late game, I'm imagining, you know, 10 to 12 battlecruisers. They go fight the main base. The army of the Protoss, Zerg, or Terran responds. And then you teleport to a peripheral exterior base of the same opponent, and you go crush that and then retreat. One of the big downsides to capital ships is that they're fairly slow. So they had a, you know, once you fought somewhere, you were super mega committed to that because there's no retreating. And that made them huge risk, huge reward. The reward being, of course, that you're using capital class ships. In this case, you have some escapability to it. There's kind of a parallel to that to the carrier. It can now deploy its interceptors. I'll get to that in the Protoss section. But I'm in love with this change. I think it's really powerful. Don't get me wrong. But if you have 10, 12 battlecruisers, you're in a really powerful position. And I feel like one of the downsides to doing that in late game was that they were so damn slow that you just opened yourself up to base trades. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't mind them chipping away at that intuitive counter, because I feel like, again, if you're in a position where you're building up a mega army like this, there should be some element of retreatability and kind of a not so one-sidedness, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think I just made up 3 words, but that's fine. The Raven, point defense drone duration decreased from 180 seconds to 20 seconds. At the end of the day, that sounds massive, and people are like, holy, I can't make Ravens anymore! Yes, you can. The biggest impact of a point defense drone is at its inception. You drop it in the middle of a fight or at a fight spot, and that ability is super powerful. The fact that it stuck around for 77 years afterwards was insane. That's not even a cherry on top. That's Heidi Klum in a bikini on top. It's just too much. It's too good. What do you even do with that? None of us are good enough to do with that. Okay. So this is fine. It's completely fine. Durable materials now increase PDD duration by 10 seconds. So yeah, the upgrade says, okay, well you get a, what is that? I can't, I'm not going to do math, but it's from 20 seconds to 30 seconds. Great. I don't think anyone will ever upgrade that. Never in a million years. You shouldn't. Don't. Missile turret. Requirement change from engineering bay to barracks. Alright. I'm not entirely sure why you would do that. I don't think Terran, I mean, excuse me. So yeah, I mean, Oracle openings were giving Terrans problems because if they didn't have, you know, an engineering bay, they're just kind of in trouble. I think it's more for like things like DTs and Burrow off of Zerg. Having an engineering bay is something that's pretty essential. They almost always do have it in a fairly early stage, but a super early DT or a super early, you know, Burrow attack would give them fits. So allowing them to have that missile turret earlier time is fine. Thor, high impact payload remove, fine. I thought that was it was a pretty, you know, it's like a whole new attack added to Thor's from Wings Liberty to Heart of the Swarm, and I think there was like 2 weeks where people cared about it. So I don't think that's a big deal. Zerg! Let's talk about Zerg. The Ravager. Again, starting off with the controversial thing first. Let's talk about it. The Ravager. A morph off of the Roach, which has increased stats and can use Corrosive Bile. Ability, Corrosive Bile. Corrosive Bile is mortar-style area of effect skill shot, which impacts after a short delay once fired. The impact strikes both air and ground units, destroying any force fields it comes in contact with. So the Ravager is a meta crusher as well. In the ZVP matchup for Protoss, You have to have an answer for this, and generally speaking, it's air units like Oracles, Phoenix, or obviously Void Rays is a big deal there as well. But outside of Phoenix, which again aren't super amazing as Ravagers, and Ravagers can hit them, especially if they pick something up and then take forever to kill it, they just kind of drop their mortar shots on that Phoenix, and now you're losing a Phoenix for a Ravager. Everything else, well, Oracles are okay, people are fine with that. Not the best at killing Ravagers, but okay at it. And Void Rays are great at killing Ravagers, but not the best after that, because it means that meta-wise, again, Zerg can reliably say, well, if Protoss kind of make it a style that they open a Void Ray, I'll just go fast Hydras and run them over. Absolutely run them over. Try making Void Rays and Disruptors at the same time. No, don't try it. It's terrible. It won't work very well. You can have one or two, but against a good Zerg that kites and micros against that single Disruptor, or maybe two at best, now you have 3 or 4 at most Void Rays, and they have 12, 15, 20 Hydras. You're dead. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but it does other things. You'll just have to trust me. You can't take an early third. What support units are using. Force fields don't really matter if they get the upgrades out there, etc., etc. So it just causes problems in that way. In my opinion, things that you could do to make the Ravager more tolerable is, slow down the cooldown on its corrosive shot. I love that it's a skill shot. I don't mind that it hits air because, again, it's hard to hit air, but if you do, you should be rewarded for that. I don't mind that it crushes force fields. I think, anything that kind of chips away at the force field mechanic is, for the most part, an okay and good thing to varying degrees. I'll get to the Protoss section. Don't worry. For those of you that are worrying about my lack of salt and sodium so far, it's coming. I love those things about it. I think the model is gorgeous, by the way. The Ravager looks so cool. So cool. If I'm a Terran player and I'm looking at the Cyclone, which is a cool name, by the way, but terrible model, and then I look at the Ravager, I'm like, dude! The Ravager's like a big spiky lurker roach thing with fire on it and like glowing eyes. It's a monster. It looks amazing. And then the Cyclone is like, beep, bop, bada, boop. I'm R2-D2's distant cousin with 4 wheels. But I shoot missiles real good, but the Ravager, very awesome. Very good job there. Cost-wise, it's, I think, 25 minerals, 75 gas off of a roach. The morph time is very little as well. I think that's another place that you could slow it down to make it more viable. In terms of fairness, slow down the build time on it. Perhaps make it an upgrade or something like that. These are the things that you would do to slow them down, because I think one of the true problems with the Ravager is not necessarily the cooldown on its corrosive bile, although that could be a place to look. It's how early you can get them, and how relatively ineffective or uncostly, I suppose. You just open up with gas openings, get the 2 base, and then you can get 5 or 6 Ravagers really quick, and then you flood behind it with roaches and lings, and you just generally run over the Protoss, unless they're prepared for it with Stargate units. But now you've pigeonholed Protoss players into a single tech area, and we know what happens when that happens. We've experienced that. So Ravager, great model, great unit, really cool rules. I love the skill shot. I love it for the game. I love it how it's going to reward people. I like that it zones things out. I think you need to slow it down. I think you need to make the Ravager a little bit more costly. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Lurker. Tier 2 siege unit that can perform a line-based area of effect ground attack while burrowed. More off the Hydra list and requires a Lurker den. So, yeah, I like the Lurker. It's from Brood War. It was like, anyone that knew me in Brood War knows that I like Lurkers. I made those almost as much as I made Ultralists. In this game, I think they're a little bit redundant with the Swarm Host. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the Swarm Host section, but it's a siege defensive unit with long-range AoE damage. Great behind stack defenses, cool in situations where perhaps they're not ready for it, but Protoss, Terran, and Zerg are bringing detection because of the prevalence of Burrow and Swarm Hosts. These guys have, a faster attack, certainly, so they're different from Swarm Hosts in that way, but they're expensive. They take up a decent chunk of supply, and they shoot in a straight line, so a lot of times things like Archons and Immortals and Charge Lots will just run them over. Bioballs won't give a damn. Back in the day when it was mostly Marines, yeah, it was tough. But now it's Marines, Marauders, Hellbats are mixed in there, and Widowmines. And yeah, against Marines they'll be pretty cool in particular. But Dark Swarm's the missing element here, the ability to say, okay, no. My 3 or 4 Lurkers are going to hold this off. And if you want to run Firebats or Hellbats underneath there and do some damage to them, cool. You're an awesome player, but otherwise you're not doing anything to them. So I'm not quite sure how they function inside this game. It'll be interesting to see. Roach. Tunneling Claws has been removed. Roaches can now always move while burrowed. Burrow move and speed increased on creep after glial reconstitution is researched. I love this. I love these changes. The Roach is a fairly bland unit. We know that since Wings of Liberty, it just wasn't a super exciting, cool unit. But it's what we got. It's the tier 1.5 of Zerg. It's hardy. It's got range attack, deals good damage, that kind of stuff. Very fun. The burrow thing has always been underutilized, and I don't necessarily even blame the players. It's largely in part because it's just not as viable to have roaches taking up supply the longer the game goes. Colossus and Mortals destroy them. Bioballs, the larger they get, and the more medeffects they have, just walk all over them. It's a well-known fact that you have early to mid-game with roaches outside of ZVZ to be super effective for the most part. With this burrow increase and just making them essentially a little bit more cost-effective for what you get, you're now having a fairly reliable harass unit in the late game. No, you shouldn't probably be maxed out on roaches, but if you have 20 of them, 2 units of 10 or 4 units of 5 or something along those lines, running around, popping up, picking off harvesters, getting inside of bases, and just generally causing problems, you're in a good spot. And I think that's much more viable with these upgrades. And again, these buffs, excuse me, and then making them more cost-effective. Great. Hydralisk can now be morphed into a Lurker. We talked about the Lurker. Groove Spines removal, +1 range added to Muscular Augment. So just kind of combining the two upgrades, speed and range. Good. I don't know if it was super necessary. Hydras are very good, actually. They got kind of a bad rap from the beginning, but then people started figuring out that them in conjunction with like Vipers and stuff is very strong. So I'm okay with this, but it's definitely a Zerg buff. In my opinion, it's something that wasn't necessarily needed, but makes them a little bit better, but an acceptable amount better. Corruptor, this is some huge changes. New ability. Caustic Spray, or as the kids are calling it, Corruptor Piss. Channeled ability that initially deals 5 damage per second to any building. Damage is increased to 25 damage per second after 6 seconds. Removed corruption ability. My god, this is huge. This changes a lot of things. A lot of times, if you had Corruptors, the downside to them was that they took up supply and functioned only as anti-air or deterrence, right? Like if you're facing Mass Phoenix, don't come near us, we will destroy you. If you make capital ships, I should probably have Corruptors, like that's how they were used. Anti-Colossus, that kind of thing, that's their classic role, I would say. But again, you could kind of get around that if you're that Protoss player or, the opponent by saying, well, okay, you killed my 3 Colossus, but now you have 20 Corruptors. That's 60 supply that you won't be using. That's, at all. You can use your corruption ability, which is really cool, by the way. Don't get me wrong. But for what you're paying for it, not great. So that was the huge risk to Corruptors, and probably too severe of a risk if we're being honest with ourselves. They probably should have had some other functions for their 3 supply and fairly heavy cost. And now they have it. Caustic Spray means that if you get a bunch of Corruptors together, which are very tanky units, well, pretty tanky units for the most part, you can now run into a base and pick off the Town Hall, you can pick off key structures. They have to relocate some serious anti-air there, probably in the form of ground troops, otherwise they're in trouble just fighting the Corruptors anyways. And they need to get there fast. 6 seconds is not very long at all, and 25 points per damage per second means that, I'm not going to do... Well, the math is something along the lines of anywhere between 12, 15, 20 seconds, and a building's dead. And that's pretty quick, especially in a late-game scenario where, let's say, you're defending your forward 5th or 6th base, but oh no, there's 20 Corruptors in my base. Well, alright, they'll kill 1 building. No. They'll just keep killing buildings. You got to get back there, and that's a big deal. That means that those Corruptors are no longer just supply sinkholes, but they're extremely effective base-destroying units. So this is a huge buff. I'm a little bit on the fence about this. I think, what I like about this is that it's easily adjusted, right? Let's say 6 seconds is too early. Fine. Bump it back to 9 or 10, 8, something like that, whatever. You can make those adjustments to make them a little bit less devastating, but still serve the same role, which is, hey, come back home. I'm dealing damage. Not coming home? Okay, there goes your Nexus. Hey, I'm killing your Robo. Still not coming home? Fine. That's a powerful ability in and of its own right. The funny thing about that is it's like you don't even necessarily need to kill the building. It's just that they will. They will kill the building and can. So you have to come home and deal with this. And it's not like warp in 4 stalkers as if it's like a, as if that's going to do anything. It won't. They'll ignore the 4 stalkers. You need to warp in 12 stalkers. You need to run back 30 marines, you know. So I like this. I like this a lot. Swarm hosts, cost modified from 200 minerals to 100 Vespene. Excuse me, modified from 200 minerals and 100 Vespene to 100 minerals and 200 Vespene. Supply increased from 3 to 4. Movement speed increased from 2.25 to 2.95. Swarm hosts now require the burrow research in order to burrow. Swarm hosts no longer collide with locusts and spawn locusts. Autocast removed. It's now, you know, a manual thing that you have to do. Spawn locust cooldown increased from 25 seconds to 60 seconds. Casting spawn locust no longer requires a swarm host to be burrowed. Huge changes here, obviously, and I'll just kind of, this is just paired with it. Weapon speed increased from 8 to 6 for locust. Locust duration increased from 15 seconds plus 10 seconds during locust to 30 seconds. So they're around a lot longer. They come out a hell of a lot less. There's more supply. They cost 200 gas, which of course is the more critical resource between minerals and gas in a lot of cases. In most cases, I would say. It's valued higher. You have less of it to go at. Generally speaking, this is considered a nerf, but of course the flying locust means that there's a lot more possibility. On some maps, swarm hosts are going to be more popular because they'll figure out, well, from this third I can attack his third and his fourth, you know, I can shut them down, and that's great. All I have to do is click a couple times to make them come out, but it comes out every 6 seconds anyway, so it's fine. I don't have super strong feelings on the swarm host specifically. With these changes, like I said, I feel like it's moving in the right direction, making it more risk. Potentially more reward with how long they stay out, but, you know, probably less reward in general. I just feel like it collides with the lurker on a lot of levels. I know a lot of people say, are nothing alike, and for the most part they're correct, but the idea of a burrow, or not necessarily burrowed, siege unit that projects, you know, fairly long range, pseudo AoE damage, it's just not very Zergy. I don't know why we're doing that. I liked the lurker in Brood War, but I liked it more with the Defiler. That was very cool, very micro-based, but also very Zergy, just kind of clouds of bugs shooting forward, and, you know, creepy crawlies running underneath, and then lurkers spine attacking. It was awesome. And of course, it's very Zergy, you know, swarm hosts spawning little bugs launching forward as well. So I guess I lose out on that argument, but I just wish they would take the swarm host out. Zerg's good. In Heart of the Swarm, they need the swarm host, absolutely. In Legacy of the Void, with all these buffs, which we're not even done talking about yet, there's a lot. They don't need it. Take it out. You got the lurker. Take out the swarm host. And very few things, if any, have ever been taken out of a launched game. The Warhound was not launched. It was betaed and taken out, but I'm pretty dire on it. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it, though. Talk about the Locust. Adrenal Gland's attack speed bonus increased from 18.6 seconds to 40%, to 40%. Huge increase. Truly, the cracklings are back, as we called them in Brood War. 12 of these suckers in your base are going to destroy you. You have to pay attention to them. Out in the field, in conjunction with Ultras in particular, amazing. We'll talk about that at the Ultras section as well. But this is great. Zerglings should be feared. They should be hard-hitting little buggers. And at Hive with Adrenal upgrade, that's when you should unlock that ability. I see them in conjunction with Nidus Worms as ultra powerful, in particular in the ZVT matchup, especially against mech, but even bio. The Nidus Worm is now guaranteed to go off. It can't be destroyed while it's tunneling. Not on the opponent's side anyways. And then you put a bunch of cracklings in a guy's base and it's going to disappear in 5 seconds. It's going to take no time at all. And those Zerglings are cost and supply low. They're efficient, I guess is what you would say. They can be. They can be larva inefficient, but otherwise they're good. And Terran are usually out on the field. If they're not out in the field, they're losing for the most part because they need to. They need to be fighting back creep. They need to be chopping at bases. And all of a sudden they have cracklings in their base all the time. This could be matchup breaking to a certain extent, or it just means that Terrans have to adjust their brain and actually start leaving forces at home to deal with these kind of things, which would be interesting. So I like it. Infestation Pit. Enduring Locust. The upgrade has been removed. New upgrade. Flying Locust. Allows Locusts to spawn by Swarm host to fly. Flying Locust can use Swoop. Requires Lair. Cost 200 minerals, 200 investment gas, 160 seconds. Swoop. Orders the Locust to land in the target location, allowing it to attack. Yeah, pretty cool. It just means they traverse terrain better. They get over cliffs. They get over, empty space, so they're stronger in that way. Fine. Good cost, good build time. The upgrade is an upgrade, which is better than them just doing it naturally. That would be horrible. But this is fine. Nidus Worm, invulnerable while constructing. This hasn't been exploited that much in the beta. Just today I watched a guy, I don't remember his name, do a 5-minute Queen Ravager Roach timing attack against a Terran who did a very generic fast expand build. He had like 4 Hellions, 5 Marauders, and 10 Marines by the time this attack hit, and it was not close. It was not close at all. So I don't know that it being invulnerable is the best. Maybe if you do that, you increase the amount of time it takes to burrow by a pretty large margin so that your opponent can prepare. So it remains the kind of thing where, like, if they don't notice it, they're screwed. Whereas in Heart of the Storm, it was more like if they didn't notice it in time, they were screwed. So now it's just more like, well, if they don't notice it, they're dead. Because there's going to be some combos, and I mean, you know, we all complain about the Nidus Worm not being used enough, so it's funny talking about this awesome buff to it, and then at the same note being like, that's too strong, let's make it so that Niduses are never seen again. I don't know that it has to be that they're never seen again, it just needs to be that they're not super overpowered, because it'll just shut down certain matchups. Viper. New ability, Parasitic Bomb. Latch onto any air unit, dealing 90 damage over 7 seconds to that unit and any air units around it. Effect persists for the remaining duration if the target is destroyed. This is incredible. It's kind of like Irradiate from Brood War. Of course, it only hits air units, and I think that's very fair. I see this being super strong against, I mean, just everything. You know, Vipers were already really strong units in all the matchups in particular. But now with this, you're doing things like irradiating, well, I'll use the right name, parasitic bombing, medevacs, capital ships for Protoss, Phoenix, and they, you know, they stack up really, really tough and don't have a lot of health, so they'll have to spread it and get the infected one out of there really quick, otherwise they'll lose the entire flock of Phoenix. It's just great. It shows more micro, it rewards the better target priority, it only hits air. If it hit air and ground, you'd see, like, you know, 20 Vipers in every game. And that would be silly. It'd be dumb. That's not Zergy. Well, I mean, it might be Zergy, but it's just not good. It'd be too strong. But hitting only air means that it's limited, but very powerful. There's a lot of air in this game, and that's a great ability, I think. So, big nod for that one. Viper's good. Ultralisk. Chitinous or chitinous plating. Bonus armor increased from +2 to +4. Massive. Massive change. That means Ultralisks are getting up to the... What is it? They have a base armor of 1 or 2, I think it is. Then with this, it's 4, and then you can have 3 carapace upgrade on Hive. So we're talking at least 8 or 9 armor, and that is unparalleled in this game. It's unmatched. So that's awesome. Ultras have been having a tough time. Marauders shut them down. Immortals shut them down. Immortals got a bit of a nerf. Marauders got a nerf. This is actually where you would see it. They do 2 attacks at half damage now. So I've actually... Detective Jeff thinks that they did that for the Ultralisk in particular, which is good. Because it used to be, oh, he's got Ultras, those are so cool, but the other guy's got 8 Marauders. That means they're obsolete. Goodbye, you know, and that was dumb. I think Ultras should be feared. I think they should be the version of the late-game capital ship for Zerg. They, of course, have the Broodlord, but that's, you know, we all know that's a lesser one. We all know that's a lesser capital ship. It's not great. So them getting 2... that equals out, in my opinion. And I really like it. The Ultras, I think, is going to return to greatness, especially with Adrenal upgrade Zerglings. And that combination is classic. You are lacking the Defiler that, of course, allowed for melee units to make all their attacks while mostly shirking off ranged attack. So very good change. Very good change. More viable Ultras is great. And I think this is, again, something that's very good about Legacy of the Void, is that it's making... some of the units that weren't necessarily obsolete, but not good, very good. Okay. Let me take a drink of water, actually. This is a super long video. Which is great. I love talking. You guys like listening, I hope. If you don't, this video is going to suck for you. Protoss. Let's talk about these changes. New unit, Adept. A slow-moving harassment unit from the Gateway that can use Psionic Transfer. Ability, Psionic Transfer. Projects an invulnerable psionic image that can move but not attack. After 7 seconds, the Adept teleports to the image's location. The mechanic of this is amazing. I love it. It doesn't go through things like marines or walls or cliffs. so it's not quite a Reaper. But it doesn't take damage, and it can go in a different direction. It's very confusing for opponents. It's great. The Adept itself, 2 shots Harvesters. It can get a cleave ability so that that shot then bounces as well, which makes it a great harass unit in that way. Functionally in the game, it's just not great. It can't hop up cliffs, so if you wall in, there it goes. It's fairly expensive at 100 minerals in the early game, and I believe 25, maybe 50 gas. I think it's just 25, though. Later in the game, it gets mowed down way too easy, and it fulfills really similar roles to other things like oracles. Disruptors are in mineral lines as well. Like I said, it can't hop over walls, so again, you're relying on them being able to run through a base, and most bases are either walled in, like Protoss and Terran, or they're Zerg, in which case you're running past, 30 roaches, and you're like, don't pay attention to me! And they're just, like, running by, and they're like, look at this cool ability! And they're like, okay, we'll follow you. And then you kill them, and then they kill you easily, because even if it's Zerglings at that stage, they're going to have enough Zerglings to just destroy you as well. But that's being generous. I mean, Zerglings would be the best bet, because then the Adepts would actually kill something. If it's roaches, they wouldn't even kill a single roach. Well, maybe like 1 or 2. So yeah, just functionally, it has the same problem as the Reaper, where in the early game there's cool scouting ability, I guess, but it's a lesser Reaper, and it's a little bit too costly for how bad it is. But if you lower the cost of it, then it becomes like an auto take gimme, and then there's going to be some chance for abuse of it in that way. My recommendations is make it able to hop up cliffs or run past cliffs. Make it a Reaper. It would just suck because it would literally just be a Reaper. That is a Reaper if it can go up cliffs. Different mechanics, same stuff. Does the exact same thing, maybe a little bit better. It's less gas, I guess, so in that way it's certainly better. Other recommendations for it, I don't know. Make it do some certain damage, certain better damage to other things. Something along those lines. It just, as is, you almost never see it, and it's highly specialized where you do see it, so you won't see it very often. The model looks cool. Obviously, it's going to have its own sound when the game releases. And like I said, the mechanic is awesome. I love the idea of, I'm running in this direction, but there goes my image, and they're going to be like, well, I need to chase the image because I know he's going to be there in a few seconds. That's so cool, and the cooldown's fairly low, so it can kind of keep doing it. That's awesome, too. You can't lower that cooldown anymore because then it's like a silly harass unit that is way overpowered. But I'm ready to be a fan. I'm ready to be a fan of the Adept, but I'm not there yet. You gotta do a little bit more. You gotta earn it. New unit, Disruptor. A light mechanical unit from the robotics facility that can use Purification Nova ability. Purification Nova. Once activated, the Disruptor becomes invulnerable, gains increased movement speed. After 4 seconds, the Disruptor emits a massive blast, dealing AoE damage in a circle, and immediately becomes vulnerable again, also losing its speed boost. This is the new Colossus in many ways. Protoss right now, as they function, really need AoE damage. They used to get that through the Archon Colossus and Templar. Of course, the heavy lifter there was the Colossus, with a nod to Templar, particularly in the TVP matchup. The Disruptor is a boon or bust unit. If you could destroy a whole army with 4 of them. You could destroy a whole fucking army. If they're anywhere, if they just kill it. So things like Stasis Field, freezing an army, if you can get a couple of those down. Stasis Mines, we'll talk about that in a second. Force Field, bad micro, not paying attention, the Disruptor will kill the whole army. And that's extremely powerful. So there's no excuse to be made for that. That's just, it is what it is. In early and mid-game, where you're kind of rushing these out to stop Ravager rushes and other pushes, they're not as good because they have no support units. One of the strong abilities of the Disruptor is, I'm running at you with this nuke, and they're like, oh god, run for the hills! They're microing back and concaving, but they're not attacking. So if you're supporting with charge lots and Archons and Immortals and Storm, while they're not fighting, the other units are kicking ass. So even if the Disruptor doesn't get a big hit off, it's disrupted their... Whoa! It's disrupted their fight enough that the rest of your army can make up for the slack, and that's pretty cool. Very aggressive, very timing and micro-oriented on both sides, which is again a good thing in Legacy of the Void. But otherwise, it's pretty ineffective in the sense that globally, Protoss got nerfed. The Colossus is a lot worse. We'll talk about that in a second. The Adept is a dysfunctional unit. Ravagers super strong. Lurkers are going to be out there. Swarmos are going to be out there. Cyclones are going to be out there. So, Terran and Zerg got stronger. Protoss got weaker in general. And we got handed this Disruptor, which is an incredible, very powerful, aesthetically awesome, cool sounding unit. I love the voice pack for it as well. But if you're playing against a effective and good opponent, they will kite back against it in the early and mid game, and then probably run you over, and then you just lost a 300 gas robotics bay requiring unit, which is extremely expensive. And it needs to be expensive for how good it is. I'm not trying to say anything else, but it takes a long time to build as well. But it's just too... We're on day 2 of the beta right now as I made this video, and I can already tell you it's a lot harder to pull off. So people are using it in harassment. They're using it with that new Warp Prism. Talk about that in a second, which is fantastic. Great harassing unit, but 300 gas, and also essential to make yourself defendable back at home in the early game. So it's not super all or nothing. I'm not sitting here saying if you don't make 2 disruptors, you're dead. It's not like that. And I'm not saying that they don't have, even against a good opponent, they won't work. Of course they will. So there is viability to them. It's less the Disruptor, and it's more the things surrounding it that I feel like need more attention. The Disruptor itself in a vacuum is fantastic. I really like it. It's a very cool ability. If you trigger it too early and don't hit a big hit, you just wasted 300 gas in a very strong unit, and now you're probably dead. If you do get a big hit, you can wipe out an entire army. Congrats. You might win. If you use it in conjunction with a Speed Warp Prism for harass or in big fights, you can pick it up and save it afterwards. Like, that's amazing. That's really cool micro stuff. So I'm in love with the idea behind this, and I think it could promote very good gameplay. Mothership Core. Time Warp maximum radius increased from 3.5 to 8. The Time Warp will now appear small at first and grow over time, and will not slow units until reaching maximum size. So that's awesome. There's a bit of delay to it. That means you have to plan your place you're putting it. It's not just instantly, oh, you're slowed. And to kind of make that less of a nerf and more of a buff, they more than doubled the range of it, the radius, excuse me. So that's phenomenal. I think this is a great change. I think auto slowing things was a little bit too strong to begin with, but having a little bit of a delay to it changes the role of it. It's a little bit less of a battlefield. You're slow, and probably too strong with Disruptor, by the way. But now you can zone out armies, you can slow down armies, you can secure retreats, you can make spots less effective, all kinds of things. Just very good as far as I'm concerned. So big tip of the hat to that. Warp Prism, this is one of my favorites. Pickup range has been greatly increased to 7. I love in their patch notes that they're like, this is a big change. Because it used to be, I think, 1, and now it's 7. That's a 7 time, that's a huge increase. And this is awesome. This means that Immortal drops are much more effective, Disruptors are much more effective, everything's more effective. Obviously, I'm not going to just say that, but it really transforms them. The Warp Prism should be used no matter what anyways for Protoss players. I think it was underused in general anyways. I mean, we saw it fairly often, but it's like every single game you should have one. In all 3 matchups. At all times. Like, that's how freaking good Warp Prisms are. But now, with the range increase, you betcha. You're saving things more often, you're dropping the Warp Prism staying alive more reliably. Everything about it's better. So, awesome. And what I like about it, too, is, again, this is something you've heard me say all video long. It promotes micro, and it rewards the better player. And I think that's just incredible. I think that's a really good thing that we're dealing with. Immortal. Remove Hardened Shield ability. New ability, Barrier. Immortal gains a 100 damage shield for 3 seconds. Mostly a nerf. Certainly mostly a nerf. The Immortal's still pretty cool. But it used to be that it was invulnerable for 3 or 4 seconds, something like that. Now it just has 100 more shield. Not good. Not enough. Things plow through that 100 damage in no time at all. If they have Stim Marines, Immortals are giant supply costs and everything else. Sinkholes. They're just terrible. They're good against roaches, of course. They still shoot their high damage shot against armored units, but they used to also tank. Now they don't really do that. And against tanks, a mech army is just going to laugh at this. It's down to other units to carry the workload now. So if that's where we're going to be at, fine. But this next section means that this in particular is just a global nerf to Protoss that sucks. It makes Protoss really hard to play in Legacy of the Void as it stands right now. The Colossus. Base damage reduced by 20%. and I think it doesn't say it, but I think it's at -1 range as well. I'm pretty sure about that. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But that damage reduction is gigantic. The Colossus it's not quite unplayable. Obviously, it'll still kill Zerglings and Marines at a decent clip, but it's just bad. It's just not very good. Now, I don't blame them. The Colossus is, in general, a boring and silly unit. Blizzard themselves have said this on numerous occasions. They're like, they've said it in their super PR polite way that Blizzard always would. They're like, the Colossus is to be a late game scary guy that maybe you shouldn't make too many of because they're so darn expensive and boring. It's just not a great unit. I think David Kim's been a little bit more candid and honest about it. They've tried to get it out a few times. But Protoss have used it as a crutch, not just because it's like a luxury for us, but because we have to. The rest of the Protoss army sucks for the most part, and we're experiencing that in the beta right now. It's very hard to win as Protoss. Unless you're doing early game cheeses or something along those lines. But as far as late game goes, it's all about the carrier, and I'll talk about that last on Protoss. The Colossus is just gone, effectively gone. And in general, I do want them to nerf the Colossus. I don't want it to be the thing that's just mass laser beams at the end of every single frickin' Protoss game. But if you do take the Colossus out or reduce its effectiveness by this much, then give us something else. You have to. The Disruptor, great. You're moving in the right direction. Adept, that's not it. Nerfing the Immortal, no. That doesn't help either. Zealot Stalker remaining the exact same, not good enough. Force Fields having more options to get trampled by things. Ultras are more effective. Ravagers stomp them. Thor's not necessarily going to do anything about that, but again, against Terran, they're not worried about Force Fields as much anyways, anywhere past when they have medevacs at all. So I feel like this is a spot that gets a giant F for me on Legacy of the Void. You need to look at this. The idea of nerfing the Colossus by itself is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing. I would recommend not necessarily nerfing it because it's so... I mean, if you're going to nerf it, you have to also reduce its cost and supply. Otherwise, you're just removing it from the game. It's just not going to do anything. But you need to buff other elements of Protoss. And just giving us the Disruptor and making the carrier better is not going to do it. That mid-game and mid to late game area of Protoss right now is extremely difficult across the board. Oracle, removed Envision. Revelation now tags cloaked and burrowed units, revealing from 60 seconds. Cost reduced from 75 to 50 energy. New ability, Stasis Ward. Constructs a cloaked trap on target location when triggered. Enemy units in proximity are trapped to in stasis for 30 seconds. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through these because I'm getting super tired. This is a super long video, and I apologize at this point. Well, hopefully you enjoy it. I love you. The Oracle is awesome, and this new ability is awesomer, and it's awesomest at the same time. It's really cool. Great for planning. It takes low energy. It does not have a timer on it, so you can mine up the whole field if they give you enough time. They can't take damage while in stasis, which I think is fair, but it freezes them for a frickin' long time, which sets up things like disruptor attacks and stuff like that, or just storms. It's just amazingly powerful if done right. So the Oracle got quite a bit better, in my opinion, from that ability alone. It has much more of a mid to late game viability other than just harassing mineral lines. Big tip of the hat. Tempest, remove damage bonus against massive units. New ability, Disintegration, deals 500 damage over 80 seconds to target unit. That's a lot of damage. I've yet to actually tool around with the Tempest. I'm not sure if... I think at least at BlizzCon, you didn't have to be there to do Disintegration. You just kind of shot something with it, and then it took that 500 damage over time. I think if that's the same case, it's pretty cool. Still gives it that kind of anti-capital ship thing, but now you have to tell it to do that, and you have to target fire. That's good. Originally, they were talking about not allowing it to hit air units. That would have been way too big of a nerf, so I'm glad that they rested where they're at. Carrier, build time reduced from 120 seconds to 90 seconds. New ability, release interceptors. Launches interceptors to fight at target area for 60 seconds. Really cool. The ability is very powerful. It allows the carrier to turn around and run while its interceptors stay there and fight, which means that the carriers have more of a survivability rate. Very good. Build time being decreased means that they fit a little bit more of that Colossus role. They're very good. They also adjusted their AI, I feel. They're a lot better and more effective in Legacy of the Void. And this is the real big winner for Protoss. Disruptor's up there as well, but the carrier is phenomenal. It obviously still needs to support units, and there's a lot of scary things out there that will take down carriers like Corruptors. But for the most part, if you can sneak out 4 or 5 carriers, they are endgame good. They will just shut down an unprepared opponent. If the opponent is prepared, with proper support, the carrier is still going to be your mega late game composition. You're not going to want anything else. So, I think it's been phenomenal. So, guys, long video, but if you're watching this on my channel, you know that I'm prone to do those kind of things. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I will be releasing more content in the future, but that's not for this video. In general, please do leave your comments. I'll be reading it and replying where needed. Hopefully you guys are enjoying watching Legacy of the Void and getting involved fairly soon. It's just closed beta right now, so I know that's creating a lot of envy for people, but the beta itself will be, you know, whenever. I almost said a time, but who the hell knows when that's going to be. And then the game itself will come out in due time. It's going to be amazing. Overall, it's super awesome. I'm having an amazing time, and I'm really excited about StarCraft 2, which, you know, if we're being honest with ourselves, towards the end of HOTS here, not being a pro player and just casting and doing it for the love of the game, it dwindled a little bit in excitement. But Legacy of the Void right now has got me like a young buck all over again. I'm so excited. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you soon, and please do share the video, spread it around, do me that favor, and let me know your thoughts, okay? I'll see you guys later.